The wine dripped from my blouse like blood. Thick, red, silent. For a moment, I couldn't move. Not because of the cold liquid soaking into my skin, but because of the 22 eyes staring at me across Daniel's parents' polished oak table. Eyes that just moments ago were filled with laughter and wedding toasts. Now they held something else. Doubt, pity, contempt. "Jessie!" Rachel hissed, her manicured finger trembling as she pointed at the wallet now resting on the table. "It was in your bag." And just like that, the room went still. The chandelier above flickered once, catching the tension like static in the air. I could feel Sarah's hand tighten around the armrest of her wheelchair beside me. My chest burned, not just from the Cabernet, but from something deeper. Humiliation, disbelief, the sharp sting of betrayal. I hadn't even touched that wallet, but it was there, dangling in her hand, pulled from a tote that sat inches from my chair. How did this happen? 3 years earlier, I couldn't have imagined this moment. Back then, I was just Jessie Carter, a marketing coordinator clawing my way through pitches and product launches in downtown Chicago. I'd grown up in Elmhurst, in a cramped 2-bedroom house that smelled of lavender candles and leftover pasta. After my dad's hardware store closed when I was 12, life didn't get easier. My mom took sewing jobs deep into the night just to keep the lights on. And my sister Sarah, she was our quiet strength. When her body stopped cooperating at 16, her spirit refused to quit. She taught me that grit didn't have to shout, it just had to endure. That grit is what got me through college, internships, late nights folding flyers for brands that wouldn't remember my name. It's what led me to Apex Marketing and to the man I never expected to find, Daniel Hayes. Daniel was already a team leader when I arrived, confident, collected, the kind of guy who remembered everyone's coffee order and never made a junior feel small. He had a laugh like slow jazz and a mind that could take a failed campaign and turn it into a headline. We spent months working side by side, late nights fueled by stale pretzels, cold coffee, and a shared playlist of Ella Fitzgerald and Louis Armstrong. Somewhere between brainstorming and client calls, I started falling for him. He was different, not just from other men, but from everyone I'd ever known. Where others saw me as the girl with the thrift store blazer and a scholarship hustle, Daniel saw someone worthy. After 2 years, he proposed by the lake, just as the sun was dropping behind the skyline. I still remember the way the wind curled around his words. "I want a life with you, not just weekends or after work. All of it." I said yes. Through tears and wind and disbelief, I said yes. My family was thrilled. Mom cried. Sarah lit up like a sunrise. "You finally found someone who sees you," she whispered, squeezing my hand with the strength of someone who's had to hold too much. But if my family embraced Daniel like a son, his family was trickier. His parents, Margaret and Robert Hayes, were warmth wrapped in wealth. North Shore money, big house, handmade lasagna, crystal decanters. They welcomed me in a way that made me believe I belonged. But Rachel was different. From the first moment we met, she made it clear I was under a microscope. Her eyes scanned me like a resume. Her tone, too polite to call rude, but sharp enough to cut, made my stomach twist. Marketing? Cute. And how exactly do you two split expenses? Her lipstick was perfect. Her smile wasn't. Daniel had warned me. She's complicated. Divorced, entitled, she doesn't really connect with people. I had brushed it off. She was going to be family, right? I imagined movie nights, spa days, inside jokes at Thanksgiving. I was wrong. Still, I tried. I wanted us to work. I wanted the picture-perfect in-laws, the shared recipes, the family holidays. So when Rachel emailed the day after we met, asking to grab lunch, I said yes. Because maybe she just needed time. Maybe I could be the bridge. Maybe. We met at a trendy little cafe in the Loop. Brick walls, Edison bulbs, the kind of place where people ordered truffle fries without flinching. Rachel arrived 15 minutes late, heels clacking like a metronome of confidence. She kissed the air beside my cheek and ordered lobster rolls with a side of champagne like it was Tuesday brunch at the Ritz. I tried to keep up, ordering something modest, pretending I wasn't doing mental math in my head. The check came. She reached for her bag, frowned, and sighed. "Oh, Jessie, I forgot my wallet. Can you cover me? I'll Venmo you later." Her tone was breezy, effortless, like this wasn't her first time. I smiled and nodded, even as something in my gut twisted. It was one lunch. No big deal. But then there was another, and another. Each time, she picked the place. Each time, the bill climbed higher. Each time, her smile came with a story. Cards left at home, a phone glitch, an awkward moment at the ATM. And each time, she promised to pay me back. By the third lunch, my stomach turned when I saw her name in my inbox. "Let's do sushi this week. I found a place with the best uni." There was no mention of the money she owed, just assumption. Entitlement wrapped in casual charm. I confided in Daniel one night as we folded laundry in our apartment. He sighed, rubbing his temples. "That's Rachel. She's always been reckless with money. After the divorce, she blew through her ex's savings. I thought maybe she'd change." "She doesn't even try to hide it," I whispered. "I know," he said gently, "but I don't want to start a war with my sister." So I kept paying. I kept nodding. I kept letting her chip away at me because I didn't want to be the fiancé who made things awkward. I told myself it wasn't worth it until she pushed further. One rainy Thursday, as I was leaving the office late, I saw her waiting outside the building, umbrella in one hand, perfectly dry despite the storm. "Hey," she called, as if this was casual. "Spot me for dinner? I'm meeting some friends, and I'm short." My chest tightened. "Rachel, you haven't paid me back for the last 3 lunches." She tilted her head, that glossy smirk curling. "Seriously? Jessie, it's just a few bucks. We're family. Don't be so stingy." I froze. My coworkers were walking by. I could feel their glances. My cheeks burned. I was no longer Jessie, the capable marketing coordinator. I was the girl who couldn't afford to stand up for herself. Daniel saw it too. He stepped out of the building, his tone low but firm. "Rachel, either pay her back or stop asking. Enough." She scoffed, loudly. "Wow, okay. Guess I'm the villain now." She walked off, leaving behind the sting of her words and the fire in my chest. I wanted to cry, not because of the money, but because it brought back all those memories I'd buried. High school friends who stopped inviting me to sleepovers when I couldn't pitch in for takeout. College roommates who called me cheap because I chose work-study over nights out. I'd spent years trying to shake off the feeling that I was less than, that I had to apologize for my limits. Rachel dragged that feeling back to the surface with a single smirk. Later that night, Sarah called. I told her everything. The lunches, the street confrontation, the humiliation. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, with her usual clarity, she said, "You've always wanted everyone to get along. But Jessie, some people don't play fair. You can't keep shrinking just to fit their version of family." Her words stuck to me like glue. I'd spent so much of my life tiptoeing around conflict, thinking if I just stayed kind, things would smooth out. But Rachel wasn't a wrinkle. She was a blade. Daniel held me that night, whispering, "She can't ruin us." But even he didn't know what Rachel was capable of. And I was just beginning to understand that kindness without boundaries isn't kindness at all. The wedding planning should have been the happiest time of my life. Cake tastings, venue tours, finding the perfect shade of ivory for the dress I never thought I'd wear. And Daniel, he was a rock. Calm through chaos, steady through stress. Every time I got overwhelmed, he'd reach across the table during a call with the caterer, trace a small circle on my palm, and mouth, "We got this." And in that moment, I believed him. But no matter how many candles I picked or centerpieces I coordinated, I couldn't shake the shadow trailing me. Rachel. After that confrontation outside the office, her invitation stopped, but her resentment didn't. The emails turned passive-aggressive. A photo of a designer gown with a caption, "What Real Brides Wear." A link to a $500 a plate venue with, "Must be nice having that apex salary." Little digs, each one calculated to land just beneath the skin. I didn't reply. I told myself silence was strength. But late at night, I stared at my inbox and replayed the tone of her voice, the way she said stingy, like it was a curse word reserved just for me. Daniel noticed my tension. One evening, while we were assembling our guest list, he said, quietly, she called Mom again. Said she felt excluded, that we're shutting her out. We didn't ask her to help because she turns everything into a circus. I snapped before I could catch myself. That's not exclusion. That's boundaries. I know, he said, but she's painting a different picture. The conversation hung between us like fog. Rachel wasn't just irritated anymore. She was laying groundwork, telling a story where she was the victim and I was the conniving outsider. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about control. That's when we decided on the dinner, a gathering of both families at his parents' home, a gesture of goodwill, a soft reset. Daniel believed that maybe, just maybe, we could realign things before the wedding. I didn't say it aloud, but I hoped to. Not for Rachel's sake, for my own peace. The night arrived with a gentle summer breeze and the scent of rosemary lamb curling from the kitchen. Margaret greeted us at the door with open arms, her smile genuine, her pearls gleaming. Robert poured wine, cracking light jokes about Daniel's childhood. My parents arrived next, followed by Sarah and her husband Mark, their 2 kids dropping drawings into my lap the moment they saw me. For a moment, it was perfect. Rachel was late, and when she arrived, perfume sharp, hair flawless, and smile just a little too tight, I knew something was coming. She kissed Margaret's cheek, hugged Robert stiffly, then sat directly across from me. Her eyes swept the room, then landed on my dress, white with tiny embroidered flowers. She said nothing, but her silence buzzed louder than any insult. Dinner began. There was laughter, a few too many stories about Daniel's college days, Sarah chiming in with her usual dry wit. I started to believe maybe this would be okay. Rachel excused herself halfway through the main course. "Just the ladies' room," she said sweetly. The moment she left, my stomach knotted. A chill ran across the back of my neck. Minutes passed. Then she returned, face pale, voice trembling, though her eyes were anything but innocent. "My wallet," she gasped, scanning the table. "It's gone." The room paused. Forks stilled. Eyes turned. Before anyone could speak, Rachel rounded the table, reached down beside me, and yanked up a soft canvas bag, the one I'd brought, resting quietly by my chair. "This!" she shrieked, reaching inside. "It was in here." She pulled out a sleek leather wallet and held it aloft like a trophy, like proof of every story she'd spun. I couldn't breathe. Every sound vanished. The clink of silverware, the ticking of the grandfather clock, the soft breath of Sarah beside me. Rachel's eyes locked onto mine. "You thief," she spat. And then, without warning, she grabbed her wine glass and hurled its contents across the table, straight into my lap. The red soaked through the fabric like a wound. Gasps echoed around the room. I sat frozen, drenched, humiliated, shaking with disbelief. Rachel stood tall, chin high, breathing hard. This is what happens when you mess with family. And just like that, the silence shattered. The wine clung to my skin like shame, warm, acidic, and redder than any humiliation I'd ever known. My hands trembled in my lap, the fabric of my dress dripping onto the hardwood floor beneath me. For a beat, no one moved. Not a breath, not a word. Only the faint hiss of the air vent overhead dared to break the silence. Rachel stood above me, one hand still clenched around the glass, the other holding her wallet like a weapon. Her chest rose and fell in triumphant fury. She had it. It was in her bag. Ask anyone. I looked up and saw Daniel's face, blanched, eyes narrowed, jaw locked. Sarah beside me didn't move, but I could feel the current running through her body like a live wire. Mark shifted uncomfortably. My parents stared at me in disbelief, their forks frozen midair. My throat burned. I wanted to speak, to defend myself, but the words tangled, caught between rage and the bitter sting of déjà vu. How many times had I been here before? Back in high school, when my classmates accused me of stealing a bracelet someone else had lost. In college, when a roommate's missing $20 bill turned into whispered rumors. Always me. Always the one who didn't fit in enough to be believed. But before I could speak, a calm voice sliced through the tension. "That's my bag." Everyone turned. Slowly, Sarah sat taller, her hands resting firmly on her wheelchair. Her eyes, clear, focused, razor-sharp, never left Rachel's. Rachel's brow furrowed. "What?" "You took that wallet out of my bag," Sarah said again, voice unwavering. "Not Jesse's." Rachel blinked. Her composure cracked for just a second, a flicker of confusion darting across her face before being buried beneath indignation. "You're covering for her." "No," Sarah said, leaning slightly forward. "You walked in tonight and greeted me first, remember? You reached down, said, 'Love the color of your purse.' You sat next to me, not Jesse, and I watched you nudge my bag further under the table with your foot when you thought no one noticed." The room was ice. Rachel's eyes darted around, searching for an ally, but none came. "You didn't know it was mine, did you?" Sarah's tone softened, but it was lethal in its clarity. "You assumed it belonged to Jesse, because you never looked closely, because you never really see anyone unless they threaten your reflection." Daniel stood. His chair scraped against the floor, sharp and sudden. His voice thundered in the quiet. "She's done this before." Rachel's mouth parted, but no sound came. "She's lied about Jesse for months. Told me she was after my money. Said she wasn't good enough for our family. She's been trying to sabotage our engagement from the moment it started." "Daniel," Rachel began, voice cracking. He didn't stop. "I didn't tell Jessie because I didn't want to hurt her. But I should have. You crossed a line tonight." Margaret gasped, her hand flying to her chest. Robert's face turned to stone. My parents sat frozen, eyes wide with the dawning realization that something much darker had been simmering beneath the surface. Sarah's tone hardened. "You're 34 years old, Rachel, and you act like a child throwing tantrums when someone else gets attention." Rachel's eyes welled, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were fury. "You're all ganging up on me," she snapped, her voice pitched high, too thin to carry the weight of the moment. "She's been manipulating all of you. You think Jessie's some innocent little—" "You threw wine at her," Sarah cut in, calm as ever. "In front of everyone. That's not manipulation. That's desperation." Rachel looked to Margaret, but her mother's eyes were glassy with tears. "I raised you better than this," Margaret whispered. Robert simply shook his head. Unbelievable. I stood slowly, the fabric of my dress sticking to my legs, wine dripping from my fingertips. My voice, when it came, was quiet, but it didn't waver. "I tried to be your sister. I paid for your lunches. I looked the other way when you called me names. But this," I looked down at the red stain blooming across my torso, "this is unforgivable." Rachel's face twisted, and she took a step back. "You'll regret this," she spat, venom rising. "No," Daniel said, stepping between us. "You will." Rachel turned on her heel and stormed out, the door slamming behind her like a final verdict. The sound echoed through the dining room, bouncing off the chandelier, the walls, our stunned expressions. Then silence. I stood there, soaked in wine and adrenaline, but no longer afraid. Not of her. Not of what people thought. Sarah reached for my hand, her palm warm against mine. Daniel whispered, "I'm sorry. I should have stopped her sooner." And for the first time that night, I smiled. The wine dried into my dress like a warning, but the sting of it had dulled. What remained wasn't shame. It was something fiercer, clean, like the moment after a storm when everything smells sharper, more honest. We sat in silence for a long while after Rachel left. No one knew what to say, or maybe everyone did. But no one wanted to be the first. Margaret reached for a napkin and gently blotted the front of my dress, her hands trembling. "Jessie," she whispered, "I'm so sorry." "We had no idea," Robert nodded, his jaw tight. "We always treated Rachel and Daniel equally. Or at least, we thought we did. But she's always wanted more." Sarah's hand stayed in mine, her grip steady, anchoring me even as the room shifted around us. Later that night, after the guests had gone home and the wine had stopped staining my skin, but not my memory, Daniel and I sat curled on the couch in his parents' den. The air was thick, with everything left unsaid. "I should have told you," he said finally. His voice was low, filled with a weight that wasn't guilt so much as sorrow. "Rachel's been calling me for weeks, saying you were using me, that you only wanted the Hayes name, that you were trying to replace her." My heart clenched, not from surprise, but from how familiar the narrative felt. The girl from Elmhurst who didn't belong, who always had to prove she was worthy of the room. "I didn't believe her," Daniel added, "but I didn't stop her either. And I'm sorry." I looked at him, and all I saw was the man who stood between me and a flying wine glass, who didn't flinch when his sister lied, who didn't let silence become complicity. "You trusted me to stand up for myself," I said, and I did. A week later, the phone call came. Rachel's ex-husband, Tom, reached out through Margaret. He wanted to talk about Rachel, about the divorce, and apparently about a trail of damage that extended far beyond our engagement dinner. Over speakerphone in the Hayes kitchen, he told us everything. How Rachel had drained their joint savings on designer handbags and luxury spa weekends. How she hosted extravagant parties for people she barely knew. How she got fired from her event planning job for skimming money from a high-profile wedding client. "She promised to pay it back," he said. "She never did. Just vanished. I figured you deserved to know. Especially now." Margaret covered her face with both hands. Robert looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. "She's been in debt for months," Tom added quietly. "I think that's why she latched onto Jessie. She saw someone to blame. Someone she could use, until she couldn't. It all made sense. The lunches, the casual demands, the escalating hostility when I didn't fold. "She's not just manipulative," I said aloud. "She's desperate." Margaret nodded. "And we've enabled her for far too long." In the days that followed, the Hayes family did something I didn't expect. They didn't sweep it under the rug. They didn't tell me to forgive and forget. They confronted Rachel, demanded she repay what she owed me, told her she needed to take responsibility for the lies, the manipulation, the wreckage she left in her wake. And when she refused, when she blamed everyone but herself, when she called me names again and accused Daniel of turning on his real family, they made a choice. They cut her off. "We'll always love her," Robert said to me that night, his voice heavy. "But we won't let her hurt you, or anyone else. Not anymore." A part of me ached hearing that. Families aren't supposed to break. Sisters aren't supposed to scheme. But Sarah's words echoed in my mind like a bell. Protect your peace. Rachel's chaos wasn't my inheritance. It wasn't mine to carry or mend or absorb. I wasn't the poor girl anymore, trying to earn a seat at someone else's table. I had my own now. And the people seated around it loved me because of who I was, not what I could give, not what I could tolerate, but because of the strength I had found in simply standing my ground. Weeks passed. The memory of the dinner faded from headlines in our family's minds, but not from mine. The stain on my engagement dress never fully came out, not from the delicate fabric, and not from the part of me that used to freeze in the face of confrontation. But I kept it anyway. Hung it in the back of our new closet like a quiet trophy. Not of the night Rachel tried to break me, but of the night she failed. Daniel and I moved into a small condo in Lincoln Park. It wasn't flashy, but it was ours. Bay windows framed the city skyline like a painting, and every night as the lights flickered on across Chicago, I'd sit in the armchair by the window and breathe. Just breathe. There were no more emails from Rachel. No calls. No cryptic texts or veiled jabs. She disappeared like smoke, leaving behind nothing but rumors. Debts she couldn't pay, collectors closing in, a lease terminated overnight. One day we heard she'd skipped town. Miami, someone said. The nightlife always suited her better than accountability. I didn't wish her harm. I didn't wish her well. I just let go. One Saturday morning, sunlight spilled across the hardwood, and Daniel was humming off-key in the kitchen, stirring pasta sauce like it was a symphony. I sat on the bathroom floor, staring at a stick. 2 pink lines. Sharp. Certain. My breath caught in my throat. My heart tried to leap and crumple at the same time. "Daniel!" I called, my voice barely more than a whisper. He rounded the corner, hands still red with tomato, eyes instantly alert. When he saw the test in my hand, his grin unfurled like sunrise. "We're going to be parents," he said, pulling me into his arms. "You're going to be the most incredible mom." And just like that, something opened in me. Not long after, I told Sarah. She gasped, wheeled her chair in quick circles around the kitchen island, then squeezed my hand and whispered, "You've always been the strong one, Jess. You just didn't know it yet." She offered to design our baby shower invitations, hand-drawn sketches, personalized details, even a tiny fox in a bow tie at the bottom corner. Her way of wrapping us in warmth, in quiet celebration. As the months passed, the weight of everything Rachel had tried to destroy seemed lighter, smaller, distant. The power she once held dissolved the day I refused to give her more of myself. That was the lesson I carried, more than any stain or memory. You don't owe anyone the parts of you they've tried to break. Rachel did call again. Once. The phone buzzed just after sunset, her name lighting the screen like a ghost from another life. I hesitated, thumb hovering over decline. Daniel looked at me from across the room, his jaw tensing. "You don't have to answer." But I did. Her voice was soft, almost childlike. "Jessie, I'm sorry. Things are really bad. I lost my apartment. Credit's trashed. No one's picking up. Can you lend me a little something? Just until I get on my feet. We're family." For a second, I remembered the girl I used to be, the one who would have said yes, who would have bent until she snapped just to be liked, accepted, safe. But that girl had grown into someone new, someone who knew the difference between helping and enabling. "Rachel," I said quietly, "family doesn't lie. Family doesn't frame you and throw wine in your face. You never paid me back for the lunches. You never apologized, not really. You didn't want help. You wanted control." She sniffed. "But we can start over." "No," I said. "You burned that bridge, and I'm done walking back into fire." I hung up before she could argue, and I didn't cry. That night, Sarah texted me a photo of a sunset, with 4 words beneath it. "You chose yourself." Finally, the wedding came on a June afternoon, with Lake Michigan sparkling behind us like a dream. Sarah rolled down the aisle beside me, her hand in mine, whispering, "You're stunning. No wine stains today." We both laughed. Daniel waited beneath a canopy of white linen, his eyes locked on mine, steady and sure. There was no Rachel, no fear, just friends, family, and the man who saw me long before I ever saw myself. As I read my vows, I felt the baby flutter for the first time, a spark of life beneath my hand, a sign we were building something real. That night, in our condo, Daniel kissed the swell of my belly and whispered, "This is the life we chose, the one we protected." And as I sat once more by the window, watching the city glow, I knew this truth. I wasn't the girl from Elmhurst anymore. I was Jessie Carter, future mother, wife, sister, fighter, and I had finally found peace. I knew something was off the moment I stepped into the boardroom. The air was too still, the tension too thick. Catherine Langford sat at the head of the table, like a queen preparing for execution. Only this time, the traitor was me. Her voice, crisp and theatrical, sliced through the silence before I even took my seat. "This is a real company, Elaine, not a science fair project," she said, her fingers perfectly spread across the polished oak. "We need someone who understands the market, someone who doesn't just tinker." I sat down slowly, ignoring the chill that ran down my spine. 6 years of work, of sweat, isolation, and innovation, were being reduced to the word tinker. I glanced at Ethan, my husband, sitting 3 seats away in his usual muted suit. He didn't meet my eyes, and that told me everything. "We've brought in Lena Armstrong to take over the R&D division," Catherine continued, her tone so polished it sounded like pity. "Effective immediately." Lena gave a modest little smile from the far end of the table. 3 months at the company, a shiny MBA from Wharton, and she already looked like she owned the place. I couldn't even summon the strength to be angry at her. Not yet. "My name is Dr. Elaine Rivers. I'm 32 years old, and I helped build Langford Dynamics from a one-room lab above a coffee shop into one of the most promising biomedical startups in the Pacific Northwest." But none of that mattered now, because to Catherine Langford, I was never more than her son's inconvenient wife. She had been waiting for this moment. The IPO was 6 months away, and she wanted a corporate face the investors could fall in love with. Not a woman in a lab coat with calloused hands and messy notes. "You'll find the transition agreement in front of you," she said, sliding a folder my way. "We're offering a generous severance package, of course, and HR will help with your offboarding." I didn't touch the papers. I just stared at the embossed Langford Dynamics logo on the folder, my name not even printed anywhere on it, not even in courtesy. "And if I refuse?" I asked. My voice was calm, colder than even I expected. A part of me had already detached, watching the scene from outside my own body. Catherine's smile sharpened. "Then we'll revisit your employment contract. I believe there's a 5-year non-compete clause. Would be unfortunate if you couldn't work in this field anymore." I remembered drafting that clause. I had written it myself, back when I believed I was protecting our company, our future. Daniel, no Ethan, finally shifted. "Mother, maybe we should reconsider." "No, Ethan," she snapped. "This isn't personal. This is business. Elaine's contributions were valuable once, but we've evolved. We need leadership, not chemistry sets." I scanned the faces around the table. Not one board member looked at me. Not Mr. Fulton, who once called me the future of biomedical engineering. Not even Marta Jensen, who toasted with me when we landed our first military contract. They were all too scared of Catherine, or too tired of caring. But what they didn't know, what Catherine had forgotten in her blind ambition, was that the patents, the algorithms, the neural interface protocols, none of it belonged to Langford Dynamics. They belonged to me. I stood up, the transition folder still untouched. "I'll need to review this with my lawyer," I said, folding my hands neatly behind my back. "I assume that's acceptable." Catherine waved her hand as if I were a fly at her garden brunch. "Take all the time you need, but I expect your office cleared by end of day. Lena needs to hit the ground running." Lena's voice followed me out, syrupy sweet. "Don't worry, Elaine. I'll take good care of your projects." I didn't reply. Let them think I was leaving quietly. Let them believe they'd won. They had no idea who they just cut loose. By the time I reached my office, the vultures had already circled. For cardboard boxes were stacked neatly by the door, labeled in black marker with my name, as if someone had taken care to ensure I wouldn't mistake this for anything but an eviction. The blinds were half closed. The space felt smaller than usual, colder. I paused just long enough to take it in. 6 years. I had spent 6 years in this room, eating takeout over spreadsheets, collapsing on that gray couch after 36-hour prototype cycles, writing the future with bare hands and borrowed time. And now, boxed up like last season's inventory, I stepped inside. On my desk was an envelope, another one, this time from HR. I didn't need to open it. I already knew the words. Please ensure all company materials remain on site. Personal belongings will be mailed to your forwarding address, pending clearance. The corporate way of saying, you're no longer welcome here. The door creaked behind me. It was Ethan. His tie was loose and he looked tired, like he hadn't slept, but not because of guilt, because confrontation had always drained him. Elaine, he said softly, a nickname I hadn't heard from him in months. I didn't answer. I was busy sliding my research journals into a box. My hands were steady. My chest wasn't. I tried to stop her, he said. You know how she gets. I turned slowly. Do I? He flinched just a little. She thinks the investors won't respond well to a non-traditional executive. With the IPO, she's worried about optics. Optics, I repeated. Right. A woman with 3 degrees, 9 published studies, and a brain full of patents is bad optics. It's not like that. It's exactly like that. I let the words fall flat, and you let it happen. His mouth opened, then closed again. No defense, no courage. I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out the only thing that mattered now, a small silver USB drive. On it was everything. My patent filings, my private correspondence, my experimental logs, copies of all licensing agreements I had negotiated, always as an individual, always in my name. Catherine had never bothered to read the fine print. I'll be out of the house tonight, I said, closing the lid on one of the boxes. I'll book a hotel for now. Elaine, wait. He stepped forward, as if realizing something was slipping through his fingers. We can talk this through. I know she was harsh, but we can fix this. I laughed. Once. Sharp. Empty. The IPO. I said, my tone suddenly calm. Good luck with that. His brow furrowed. What do you mean? I didn't answer. I picked up the first box and started walking. His hand caught my arm gently. What are you planning? He asked, his voice cracking under the weight of fear. I turned, met his eyes, and said the one thing I knew Catherine would understand perfectly. It's just business. Nothing personal. Then I walked away, leaving my husband standing in an empty hallway, surrounded by silence and the very empire that would soon begin to collapse. The apartment I moved into wasn't much, bare walls, a mattress on the floor, and a view of the highway instead of the sound. But it gave me something I hadn't felt in weeks. Control. No footsteps outside my office. No eyes tracking my schedule. No emails from HR. Just silence and the low hum of something rebuilding itself inside me. 1 week after my forced exit, I walked into the marble lobby of Delgado and Rice LLP with nothing but a USB drive in my coat pocket and fire in my chest. Jonas Delgado looked up from his desk the moment I entered. I saw it on the news, he said, pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose. Langford's big shakeup. Guess I shouldn't be surprised. I am, I replied, dropping into the chair across from him. Not that it happened, just that it took her this long. He nodded. You're ready. I took the USB out and placed it on the glass between us. Everything we prepared. Everything I kept. It's time. He opened the files, scanning quickly. It didn't take long. Jonas had helped me structure every agreement from the beginning. When I first joined Langford Dynamics, fresh out of my postdoc program, I insisted on one thing: retention of individual patent ownership. Catherine had scoffed, but she let it slide, probably thinking it was just a naive little boundary I'd forget about later. But I never forgot. You're covered, Jonas said after a moment. All core patents are yours. Langford Dynamics only holds usage licenses, temporary ones, tied to your employment. And now, He smiled faintly. Now they're expiring, and they can't launch their new product line without infringing. If they do, we sue. If they stall, they miss their IPO window. I sat back. So we wait. We wait, Jonas confirmed. Let them move forward. Let them invest, build hype, get the media rolling. And then we show them who actually owns this company's future. The idea wasn't revenge. Not really. I wasn't here to burn Catherine's name to the ground or humiliate Ethan in front of the board. I just wanted the truth to be louder than the lies. I wanted a moment of silence, and then the sound of everything falling into place. For the next 3 weeks, I worked like a woman possessed. By day, I met with legal teams and investors, mapping out every route I could take once the dominoes fell. By night, I combed through every file I'd ever touched at Langford, highlighting what was mine, what was shared, what they had no right to touch. Meanwhile, Langford Dynamics moved quickly. Catherine released a statement about a new era of innovation. She used words like streamlining, vision, and corporate alignment. She praised Lena Armstrong's business-first leadership and fresh perspective. My name wasn't mentioned. Not once. But that was fine. They wanted the story to be about Catherine Langford saving the company. They were going to get a very different headline soon. Jonas and I watched them dig themselves deeper. Press releases, teaser videos, investor roadshows. The more they committed to the launch, the better for us. Every dollar they spent made the fall harder. Still, some nights when I couldn't sleep, I wondered if I was being petty. If this was just a grudge in disguise. But then I'd think of Ethan's eyes that day in the hallway, how hollow they looked. And of Catherine's voice, polished and poisonous, as she smiled across that boardroom table. And I'd remember, they didn't just push me out. They tried to erase me. I wasn't going to let that happen. 3 months later, the headlines were everywhere. Langford Dynamics to announce revolutionary biomedical launch. IPO surge expected as company prepares new neural interface tech. CEO Catherine Langford to lead historic presentation in Seattle. I watched the press unfold from a leather armchair in Jonas Delgado's office. We had coffee. We had screens. We had time. Downstairs at Langford HQ, investors were gathering. Cameras were rolling. Catherine was preparing her speech, probably practicing her signature pauses, the kind that made her seem in control even when the ground was cracking under her heels. They're 10 minutes out, Jonas said, checking the live stream buffer. You ready? I nodded, reaching into my bag. The email was drafted and waiting. All I had to do was press send. The stream came alive. Catherine Langford took the stage in her deep navy power suit, a smile so practiced it barely twitched under pressure. Lena stood to her left, her posture immaculate, her smile a little too wide. On the screen behind them, my work, the very heart of it, flashed in sleek animations and bold language. Adaptive neural biolink, they called it. Years in the making. Yes, I thought my years. Catherine began her speech. Ladies and gentlemen, this moment marks the culmination of relentless innovation and visionary leadership. I didn't need to listen. I had written versions of that speech before, when we were smaller, when we were honest. But this wasn't about memories anymore. Now. Jonas asked. Wait, I said, sipping my coffee. Let her finish her big opening. A few minutes in, a reporter from the front row stood up. I recognized her immediately, Maya Trent, investigative journalist from Bloomberg Tech. The kind of woman who never asked permission and never softened question. Ms. Langford, Maya said, clearly, the technologies presented today appear nearly identical to a series of patents registered to Dr. Elaine Rivers. Can you speak to the licensing arrangements your company has in place? Catherine's eyes flickered, just for a second. Then the media training kicked in. All intellectual property presented today is legally licensed and documented, she said smoothly. Langford Dynamics holds full rights to our entire product portfolio. I met Jonas's eyes. Now, I said. He turned his laptop toward me. I pressed send. The email went out instantly to every major tech outlet, every investor on Langford's IPO list, and every legal contact Jonas and I had prepared. Subject: Patent Use Suspension Notice, Dr. Elaine Rivers' body. As of today, I am revoking Langford Dynamics license to use my patented neural interface technology. Any continued use constitutes infringement and will be pursued legally. Phones began buzzing in the press room. Catherine kept talking, unaware at first. But then the murmurs grew louder. Eyes dropped to screens. A few investors began whispering, then standing up. Maya Trent raised her hand again. Ms. Langford, we've just received a statement from Dr. Rivers. It says your rights to use her patents have expired. Can you confirm or deny this? For the first time in years, Catherine Langford went speechless. Lena's face paled. The live feed stuttered for a moment as camera operators zoomed in on the confusion unraveling on stage. Catherine fumbled through her cue cards. This is a miscommunication. We'll be reviewing the legal claims internally. But it was too late. Investors were walking out, phones glued to their ears. Stocks began slipping. First 2%, then 5%, then double digits in a matter of minutes. Behind Catherine, the glossy images of my research were still spinning across the screen like digital ghosts, reminding them all of the woman they tried to erase. I closed the laptop gently. Perfect timing, Jonas murmured. That just sank their IPO. I leaned back in my chair, every nerve buzzing not with adrenaline, but with clarity. They started this, I said quietly. Now I finish it. My phone rang less than 30 minutes after the presentation collapsed. Catherine Langford. Right on cue. Jonas looked over from the kitchen counter, where he was making tea like this was just another Tuesday evening. Take it, he said, a knowing smile tugging at his mouth. But remember, every word matters now. I let it ring twice more, then picked up. Hello, Catherine. Her voice came in tight, controlled, like a piano wire drawn too taut. What do you think you're doing? I sat down by the window, watching the Seattle skyline flicker in the dark. Protecting my intellectual property, I said evenly. Isn't that what you taught me? Always protect your assets. Your assets, she hissed. Everything you developed was for Langford Dynamics. You don't have the right. I have every right, I interrupted, letting the chill in my tone spread. You never bothered to read the fine print, Catherine. You were too busy positioning Lena for photo ops. There was a pause, a heavy, dangerous silence. What do you want? She finally asked, voice lower, less steel, more desperation. I looked over at the stack of documents Jonas had printed earlier, the licensing terms, the paper trail, the proof that every innovation tied to their IPO was still legally mine. I want what I've earned, I said, and we'll discuss the details with our lawyers. I suggest you prepare thoroughly this time. This isn't over, Elaine. No, I agreed. It's just beginning. I ended the call without waiting for her reply. Jonas raised his mug in salute. But the evening wasn't done yet. Not 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. Ethan. I considered ignoring it, then answered. He didn't waste time. You planned this, he said, voice hoarse. From the beginning. No, I said simply. I planned at the moment your mother decided my work didn't matter. When she tried to hand my life's work to someone else like it was hers to give. He was quiet. I pressed on. Do you know what hurt the most, Ethan? Not her. You. You were supposed to stand beside me. You were supposed to know better. I didn't think she'd actually. No, I cut him off. You didn't think I'd fight back. He exhaled shakily. The board is in meltdown. Investors are pulling out. Our stock dropped 15%. 23, I corrected. I've been watching. You're destroying everything we built. I shook my head slowly. You still don't get it. I'm not destroying anything. I'm just taking back what's mine. What do you want, Elaine? Name your price. I laughed then. A soft, sharp sound that held no humor. That's the problem. You think this is about money. Then what is it about? It's about respect. It's about knowing what I built and refusing to be erased for the sake of your mother's vanity. He was silent again. I walked to my desk, picked up a slim folder, and pulled out the printed email chain. Do you want to know what she wrote about me in her messages to Lena? That I was a necessary inconvenience. That I needed to be managed out quietly so you could pursue a more suitable future. His voice dropped. Where did you get that? I'm the one who built your company's entire data security system, remember? When he didn't answer, I added softly, You weren't just silent, Ethan. You were complicit. The last thing he said before hanging up was almost a whisper. She never thought you'd go this far. She should have, I replied. You both should have. I stood by the window long after the call ended, watching the world go on outside, while everything Catherine Langford built began to unravel. And deep in my chest, for the first time in years, I felt free. The message came through a private number, just past 10 p.m., Lena Armstrong. I need to talk to you. In person. Please. I considered ignoring it, but curiosity has a way of slipping through even the strongest walls. So I agreed on my terms. The next morning, I arrived at the Edison Cafe on Peachtree Street. Quiet, upscale, neutral ground. Lena was already there, sitting stiffly at a corner table with a cappuccino she hadn't touched. Her blazer looked slightly wrinkled. Her face, usually polished to corporate perfection, was pale, exhausted. Elaine, she said as I sat down, voice strained. Thank you for coming. I nodded. Why am I here? She took a breath. This isn't about saving face. I know what I did. I know how it looked. But you need to understand, I thought I was stepping into a role. I didn't realize I was stepping into a war. I stayed silent. She told me you were stepping down, Lena continued, that you were overwhelmed, that the company needed a steadier hand for the IPO. I believed her. I raised an eyebrow. And you believed that without asking me? Without a single question? Her lips tightened. I was ambitious, naive, maybe both. But that's not why I asked to meet. She pulled out a flash drive from her coat pocket, setting it gently on the table. She's preparing to sue you. Hard. Not just civil litigation. She's working with a team to fabricate internal documentation to make it look like you developed your patents on company time, without prior agreement. I blinked slowly. She's planning to tie you up in court until your licenses expire, hoping to freeze your ability to collaborate with any new partner, Lena added. She's even considering criminal charges, fraud, data manipulation, misappropriation. I let the silence stretch, then said, Why are you telling me this? Her shoulders slumped. Because I didn't sign up for this kind of war. I wanted to lead R&D, not destroy the woman who built it. And because I know what it feels like to be used. She's using me now the same way she used you. I reached for the flash drive, but paused. If I help you land on your feet, what's stopping you from flipping again when things get hard? Her face flushed, but her voice finally held some steel. Nothing, except that I'm done being someone's pawn. I want out. I pocketed the drive. You'll send me everything? I asked. Every document, every email, every voice memo I've been copied on. And you understand what happens next, right? I said softly. This ends with her removed. Publicly. Lena nodded. I'm counting on it. As I walked away from the cafe, I could feel it, pieces clicking into place. The trap she'd set for me was about to spring shut on her. That night, I sat in my apartment with the lights off and reviewed everything Lena had sent. It was worse than I expected. Catherine had been preparing this for over a year, long before the IPO talks began. Her emails outlined a strategy to paint me as an unstable founder. Her memos to PR hinted at quietly phasing out the scientist image in favor of professional female leadership with market polish. She hadn't just wanted me gone. She wanted me discredited. I forwarded the full archive to Jonas with one line, "Let's end this." The elevator ride to the 21st floor felt different this time. No bitterness, no fear, just focus. Jonas stood beside me, a leather portfolio under one arm and a quiet fire in his eyes. "You ready?" he asked. "Let's finish it," I replied. The boardroom was already full when we stepped in, just like the day I was ousted. Same table, same polished wood, same silence. Catherine Langford stood at the head of the room, mid-sentence, gesturing toward a projection of financial projections. Ethan sat beside her, shoulders tight, eyes flickering toward the door when he saw me. Lena was there too, pale, but still. The moment Catherine noticed us, her voice froze. "What is the meaning of this?" she snapped. "This is a private meeting." "Actually," I said, placing the folder on the table, "this is exactly where we need to be." I looked at the chairman, an older man named Bruce Taylor, who had served on this board longer than anyone. "We have evidence of attempted fraud, patent theft, and internal manipulation that concerns every shareholder in this room." "Let her speak," Bruce said firmly. "Given the company's current crisis, I think we all deserve transparency." Catherine's jaw clenched. I opened the folder. For the next hour, I presented everything. The patents filed in my name, the licensing agreements, the termination triggers, the internal emails, doctored, forwarded, and deleted, Lena's sworn testimony, audio clips, memos, every single thread Catherine had pulled to quietly erase me, now strung together in public view. Her face changed color 3 times, but she never interrupted. Not once. When I finished, the room was quiet, the kind of quiet that carries consequences. Catherine stood. "This is ridiculous," she said, voice trembling. "She's trying to destroy everything we've built." A pause. Then Ethan spoke. "No," he said. "She's trying to save it. From you." Gasps rippled around the table. Catherine turned to him, horrified. "Ethan." "I move for an immediate vote of no confidence in the current CEO," he said, standing straighter than I'd ever seen him. One by one, hands went up. Unanimous. Within minutes, Catherine Langford was no longer CEO of Langford Dynamics. Within 2 hours, the board had voted to approve my proposal, an emergency partnership with Thompson Medical that would stabilize the company, preserve my patents, and avoid a catastrophic lawsuit. A merger that would transform both companies into something stronger, and mine. As the room cleared, Ethan approached. His eyes were tired, but genuine. "I know it's too late," he said quietly. "Too late for us, I mean. But thank you for showing me what real strength looks like." I nodded. "Take care of the company, Ethan. Make your father proud." Then I turned, gathered my things, and walked out of that boardroom, not as the girl who had once been someone's wife, but as the woman who just rewrote the future. The new office wasn't grand, not like the glass fortress Catherine used to rule from, but it had everything I needed: light, space, silence, and a locked cabinet full of signed licensing deals. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the Seattle skyline blink against the fading light. Behind me, a full wall was lined with framed patents, my name engraved on every one, not hidden in a lab, not buried in fine print, but visible, public, proud. 6 months ago, they tried to write me out of the story. Today, I sat on the board of directors of Thompson Medical, one of the most respected tech health firms in the country. We had just finalized the merger with Langford Dynamics under new leadership. My leadership. I had spent the last few months rebuilding what Catherine tried to destroy. Not just my reputation, but my voice, my momentum, my belief in the work itself. We launched 3 pilot programs for adaptive neural recovery therapy in veterans' hospitals across the West Coast. The first clinical data just came in. The technology one created was changing lives. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt like I could breathe. A soft chime pulled me out of the moment. A package sat on the edge of my desk, small, brown paper, hand-addressed. No return label, but I knew that handwriting anywhere. Inside was a familiar object. A tiny robot figurine with uneven arms and a lopsided smile, the very first prototype I ever built back in grad school. The one I kept on my desk every day until the day they boxed me up. Tucked beside it was a note in Ethan's handwriting. This belonged with its creator. Thank you for teaching me what real business looks like. I didn't cry. I just smiled, then placed the robot next to my monitor, like a quiet guardian of everything I'd fought for, everything I'd reclaimed. They called me a hobbyist, a woman with too much brain and too little polish, an inconvenience, a liability, a temporary player in someone else's empire. But they forgot the most important rule in business. Never underestimate a woman with nothing left to lose and everything to prove.